Americans have gone through a plethora of problems throughout the years, that of which includes the Iranian hostage crisis. One of the very important events leading up to the hostage crisis was the oil embargo of 1973. Arab members of OPEC started an embargo against the U.S. This was done in retaliation for the U.S. helping the Israeli army during post-war negotiations of peace, specifically by resupplying them to gain leverage.
In the brinks of conflict that Iran has with America, they are fighting another war, and that war is with Israel over the billions of dollars that they owe Iran for oil debts. Iran sued Israel and won several cases, as well as Israel classifying Iran as an enemy state.
This only added fuel to the fire. The most crucial point in this was when Iran's leader, the Shah, went to the U.S. for cancer treatment. Iran asked for him back, but America refused. Because of this, militants that also happened to be college students, read by the Ayatollah, who was the man that took power when the Shah went to America for cancer treatment. He also despised America and all of its people. Went to the American embassy on November 4th, 1979, and then proceeded to take it over and seize 66 Americans. Of these 66 Americans, they only kept 52 of them. The people they initially let go were African Americans, women, and children.
The 52 people that were left over were left to endure the full wrath of their captors. These hostages were subject to ruthless beatings that left them close to death multiple times. Mock executions that would stretch on for days where none of them really knew if they would live or die. The hostages were also subject to debilitating amounts of isolation, to the point of where they possibly went crazy. After enduring this torment for 5 months and failed negotiation after failed negotiation to set the hostages free, around April 1980, American military officials come up with a possible rescue attempt called Operation Eagle Claw. The operation was put into training exercise stages shortly after. On April 16, 1980, Jimmy Carter approved the operation to take place. Eagle Claw was supposed to be a 2-day-long affair. The plan was for the helicopters and C-130s to meet on a piece of land called Desert 1, 200 miles away from southeast of Tehran. The helicopters were supposed to refuel at the rendezvous point via the C-130s, then load the troops on the helicopters, then the troops on the helicopters on board would transport them to their final destination, which was the mountain from where the rescue mission would be launched. On April 24th, Operation Eagle Claw began. U.S. forces were able to take the Desert 1 landing zone very quickly after the small victory. A bus carrying 40 Iranians passed by the helicopters and planes. But to keep the mission under wraps, those over 40 people were detained by the U.S. troops. Next, 2 of the 8 helicopters that were being used had mechanical failures and could not press on any further.
Shortly after, they were hit with a dust storm which severely hindered their ability to see. Because of this, the remaining helicopters got to Desert 1 over 90 minutes after the original planned time. Things got even worse when another helicopter experienced technical issues. The mission was aborted because it was an impossible task with only 5 helicopters. The final nail in the coffin was when the troops were getting prepared to leave. A helicopter hit one of the C-130 planes and exploded, killing 5 airmen and 3 Marines. This mission was successfully a disaster. The rest of the troops were evacuated and everything else was left behind. Multiple helicopters, weapons, and they're dead.
Soon after this utter failure of a rescue mission, negotiations started to be held during late 1980 and early 1981. These negotiations were, of course, about ways the U.S. and Iran could compromise and the U.S. could get their people back. The deal ended up being that the U.S. first lifted the trade embargo that they had imposed on Iran at the time. In addition to releasing the assets the U.S. had frozen, after this deal had been agreed upon by both sides, the hostages were set free on January 20th, 1981.
This series of events definitely changed how America deals with its military operations, in that after Eagle Claw, the U.S. military put into effect better internal operating procedures to stop a massive lack of communication between the different branches of military involved in the operation. It also changed in a bad way in that the U.S. people started to have bad blood towards Iran and its people. However, this event ultimately ended up altering the U.S. to aid in what it has become today.